The city had long lived in fear of the man known only as the Phantom. He was a ghost in the underworld, a ruthless criminal who left no traces, no witnesses, and no mercy. For years he had terrorized families, abducting their loved ones and demanding hefty ransoms. Some hostages were lucky enough to return home. Others, those whose families failed to meet his demands, were never seen again. This time, his eyes were set on an even bigger prize, the daughter of one of the city's wealthiest businessmen, Mr. Adil Rahman. Adil was not just a rich man. He was an influential figure with political connections, vast real estate holdings, and powerful friends. His fortune made him a target, and the Phantom knew that kidnapping his daughter, Sarah Rahman, would guarantee a massive payout. Sarah, a 21-year-old university student, lived a life of privilege. She was used to security guards, luxury cars, and high-end fashion, but she never imagined she could be in danger. She was independent, strong-willed, and never paid much attention to the warnings of her father's security team. Despite her family's wealth, she liked to visit cafes with her friends, walk in the park alone, and enjoy life like an ordinary girl. It was this carefree attitude that made her the perfect target. The Phantom had been watching her for weeks. He knew her routine: the cafe she visited after class, the gym where she worked out in the evenings, and the quiet street she walked down on her way home. He noted how, despite her father's wealth, she often refused to have a security detail with her. It was a mistake she would soon regret. One evening, as the sun set behind the city's skyline, Sarah stepped out of her favorite cafe, scrolling through her phone. She was alone, her driver waiting just a block away. She didn't notice the black van parked near the alley, nor did she see the two masked men watching her from the shadows. She had no idea that her fate was about to change forever. As she reached the street corner, she heard footsteps behind her. Before she could turn around, a strong arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her backward. A hand clamped over her mouth, muffling her scream. Her phone slipped from her fingers, crashing onto the pavement. A dark figure dragged her toward the van as another man opened the door. She kicked, struggled, and tried to bite her captor, but he was too strong. Within seconds, she was shoved inside, the door slammed shut, and the van sped away. The kidnapping was executed with military precision. By the time the police were alerted, the Phantom and his men had already vanished into the night. Sarah Rahman was now a hostage, trapped in the clutches of the city's most feared criminal. Her father would soon receive a chilling message: pay or she dies. Sarah Rahman's world turned into a nightmare the moment she was thrown into the dark van. The men moved quickly, their actions rehearsed and precise. A rough cloth was forced over her mouth, filling her lungs with the sharp sting of chloroform. She struggled, kicked, and tried to scream, but within seconds, her body grew weak. Her vision blurred, and darkness consumed her. When she awoke, the first thing she noticed was the unbearable silence. The air smelled of damp wood and rust. Her head pounded as she struggled to sit up, her wrists aching from the tight rope binding them together. She blinked, trying to adjust to the dim light. The room was small and cold, with cracked concrete walls and a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. A steel door stood across from her, locked and unyielding. She was trapped. Her heart pounded as she tried to remember what had happened. The cafe, the footsteps, the van. A wave of panic hit her as she realized she had been kidnapped. She twisted her wrists, hoping to loosen the ropes, but they were too tight. Fear and anger mixed inside her. Why me? What do they want? The answer came soon enough. The door creaked open, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, dressed in black, with a ski mask covering his face. His presence filled the room with an eerie, suffocating aura. He crouched down, staring at her for a moment before holding up a phone. The screen lit up, revealing a video call. On the other end was her father, Adil Rahman. His usually composed face was filled with terror. "Sarah," he gasped. "Dad," she cried, tears welling up in her eyes. A deep, cold voice interrupted their brief reunion. "Mr. Rahman, if you want your daughter back alive, you will pay 200 million rupees in cash. No police, no tricks. You have 48 hours." Adil's face went pale. "Please don't hurt her. I'll give you whatever you want." The masked man didn't respond. He simply ended the call and pocketed the phone. Then, without another word, he stood up and walked out, locking the door behind him. Sarah's breaths came in short, panicked gasps. Her father would pay. She knew he would. But she also knew these men were ruthless. What if they killed her anyway? She had to escape. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for anything she could use to free herself. But there was nothing. Just four walls, a locked door, and the cold realization that her life depended on men with no mercy. Outside, the Phantom and his men watched the video recording of the call. They had done this before. They knew the fear, the desperation, the way a father's love could be used as leverage. To them, this was just business for Sarah. It was a fight for survival. Adil Rahman felt his world shatter the moment the call ended. His daughter, his only child, was in the hands of a monster demanding 200 million rupees. His hands trembled as he gripped the phone, his mind racing. He had wealth, power, and influence, but none of it mattered now. All that mattered was getting Sarah back, alive. His wife, Anila, sat frozen beside him, her face pale. Adil, we have to pay them. Whatever they want, just pay it, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I will, Adil said, his jaw clenched. But we have to be smart. We don't even know if they'll let her go after we pay. His mind went to the police. Involving them was a risk. The kidnappers had warned against it, and he knew what these criminals were capable of. But he couldn't just sit and do nothing. He grabbed his phone and called Inspector Shabazz, a seasoned officer known for handling high-profile cases. Within minutes, Shabazz arrived at the Rahman mansion with his team. Mr. Rahman, I understand your fear, he said, his tone firm yet calm. But these men don't always keep their word. If we don't act carefully, they might take the money and kill your daughter anyway. Adil felt a chill run down his spine. Then what do we do? We need time to track them, Shabazz said. How did they contact you? They called on a private number, Adil replied. Shabazz sighed. They're professionals, but they will contact you again. We'll be ready. Meanwhile, Adil's men began gathering the ransom money. 200 million rupees in cash wasn't easy to arrange, even for a wealthy businessman. His financial advisors warned that withdrawing such a large sum all at once could raise suspicion, but Adil didn't care. He ordered his banks to liquidate assets, sell stocks, do whatever it took to get the money. Every second wasted was a second his daughter suffered. As the family scrambled to gather the ransom, Shabazz's team worked tirelessly, analyzing phone records, security footage, and informant reports. They knew the Phantom was behind this. He had struck before, always using burner phones and remote locations, but this time, Shabazz was determined to catch him. Hours passed, each one heavier than the last. Anila refused to eat, sitting by the phone, waiting for it to ring. The mansion, once full of life, now felt like a prison of fear. Every minute felt like an eternity. Then, finally, the phone rang again. Adil's heart pounded as he answered, "Have you got the money?" The cold voice sent shivers down his spine. "Yes," Adil said, his voice shaking. "Please, just let my daughter go," the Phantom chuckled. "Not yet. Instructions will follow." The call ended. No location, no time, just uncertainty. And for the Rahman family, the nightmare was far from over. The cold, damp room had become Sarah's prison. Time had lost meaning. Was it day or night? She didn't know. Hunger gnawed at her stomach and exhaustion weighed down her body, but the worst part was the fear. Would they kill her? Would she ever see her parents again? The steel door creaked open, and her heart pounded. He was back. The Phantom stepped inside, his towering figure casting a long shadow across the dimly lit room. He had been patient, waiting for the ransom, playing the game. But now, his patience was wearing thin. He had seen too many fathers stall, hoping for a miracle. He wouldn't let that happen. Without a word, he grabbed Sarah's arm and yanked her to her feet. She winced as the ropes around her wrists dug into her skin. "Your father thinks he has time," he muttered, his voice as cold as ice. Let's remind him what's at stake. Sarah barely had time to react before pain shot through her body. His slap sent her crashing to the ground, her cheek burning from the force. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to cry. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. The phantom crouched beside her, tilting her chin up with a gloved hand. "Brave girl," he said mockingly. "But bravery won't save you." He pulled out his phone and started recording. The red light blinked, a silent witness to the horror about to unfold. "Say hello to your father." Sarah swallowed hard. Her lips quivered, but she stayed silent. The phantom's patience snapped. He grabbed her hand and pressed a knife against her finger. "Let's make this simple. You speak, or you lose a finger." Terror gripped her, but she knew she had no choice. "Dad," her voice trembled. "Please, please pay them." The phantom smirked and ended the recording. He sent the video to Adil Rahman with a simple message. "No more waiting. You have 24 hours. Back at the Rahman mansion, the phone buzzed. Adil grabbed it, his hands shaking. When he played the video, Anila screamed. Adil's heart stopped at the sight of his daughter, her swollen cheek, the fear in her eyes. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "I'll pay them everything. Just tell me where." But there was no reply. In the dark room, Sarah's nightmare continued. The phantom wasn't. Adil Rahman had never felt so powerless in his life. The video of Sarah's bruised face, her terrified plea, and the ruthless warning had shattered him. There was no more time to negotiate, no more hope for a clever escape plan. All that mattered was saving his daughter. By morning, the ransom was ready, 200 million rupees in cash, packed in black duffel bags. Inspector Shabazz and his team tried to track the kidnappers, but the phantom was too smart. He had demanded that Adil come alone, with no police, or Sarah would suffer the consequences. At exactly midnight, Adil arrived at the drop-off point, an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the distant howling of stray dogs. His hands trembled as he placed the money where instructed, his heart hammering in his chest. "I did what you asked," he shouted into the darkness. "Now give me my daughter." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a phone rang. Adil fumbled to answer. "Good job, Mr. Rahman." The phantom's voice was calm, almost amused. "Your money is safe, but your daughter, well, let's just say money can't buy everything." A cold chill ran down Adil's spine. "No. No, you promised." A cruel chuckle. "I lied, and then a gunshot." The phone fell from Adil's hands. His legs gave out as a scream tore through the night, a scream of unbearable pain, of a father realizing his worst nightmare had come true. By the time the police stormed the hideout, it was too late. Inside the cold, abandoned warehouse, they found Sarah's lifeless body lying on the floor. A single bullet hole in her chest, blood pooling around her. Her once bright eyes were now empty, staring into nothingness. Near her body, scrawled on the wall in red paint, was a chilling message. "Some lives are worthless. Money means nothing to me." The phantom had vanished, leaving behind only pain and unanswered questions. Back at the Rahman mansion, the once grand home was now filled with grief. Anila collapsed, screaming Sarah's name, her sobs echoing through the halls. Adil, the once powerful businessman, sat motionless, staring at the floor, his soul shattered. He had given everything, but lost the one thing that mattered. Inspector Shabazz clenched his fists as he read the message. This was no ordinary criminal. This was a monster who thrived on suffering. The case wasn't over. The hunt for the phantom had just begun. But for Sarah Rahman, the battle had already been lost. She had paid the ultimate price.